I'm Amy Goodman. Our guest for the hour is Michael Moore. His new book is Here Comes Trouble, Stories from My Life. Your early years, Michael, why did you choose to write this book?
I decided to write this book because I like to read short stories. And I've always wanted to write a book of short stories, and I thought, why don't I just start with not made-up stories, but the ones from my own life? Because I had a very interesting, to put it mildly, life before I was a filmmaker, before anybody knew who I was. So
your parents didn't even know?
Well, no, my parents, my parents knew very well, actually, and perhaps maybe encouraged it on some level, because my mother had made the mistake of teaching me to read and write by the time I was 4. So I was already doomed at that point as soon as I entered school. And also, as I remember it, it was asking questions was an okay thing in our household. So as a little tyke, that was not put out. The flame of that was not extinguished. So,
though it did get you kicked out of seminary, didn't it?
Well, yes. By the time I was in 9th grade, I was very enamored, inspired by the Berrigan brothers. I was very enamored, inspired by the Berrigan brothers, the 2 priests who had led anti-war protests, who committed acts of civil disobedience against the war, and also the whole Catholic community around Cesar Chavez and at that time there were a lot of these radical priests, and there was one actually in our parish, and so I thought, well, this is what I want to do. I was very enamored, inspired by the Berrigan brothers, the 2 priests. At that time there were a lot of these radical priests, and there was one actually in our parish, And so I thought, well, this is what I want to do.
I'm so impressed by what I'm seeing here. You have done something very important and very historic.
I was very enamored, inspired by the Berrigan brothers, the two priests. At that time there were a lot of these, radical priests, and there was one actually in our parish, and so I thought, well, this is what I want to do. But of course, I'm 14 years old, so I turned 15 while I went away to the seminary in the first year. And the priests there were probably not that pleased with me, again, because I was asking all these questions, why this, why that. And the Catholic Church is not an institution where you want to ask a lot of questions. Anyways, by the end of that year, between that and the fact that the, normal hormones had kicked in, and I read the rule book and figured this probably wasn't the best place to be for a teenager, I went in to tell them I wasn't coming back, and I sat down before I had a chance to say anything. The Father DeWicki said to me, you know, we're asking you to leave and not come back. And I said, wait a minute, you can't fire me. I'm quitting. He said, well, great, we're in agreement. So for once, anyway, so that was the end of my my years as a potential Catholic priest.
Talking about illustrious Catholics, can you talk about your encounter with Bobby Kennedy?